What if I told you the most devastating revenge isn't loud, it's silent, and it works without you lifting a finger? They expect your silence to mean weakness. But what happens when your silence means you've already moved on? The most dangerous thing you can do to someone who discarded you is to let them see you at peace without them. Welcome to StoicCraft, where every week we turn heartbreak into emotional strength, chaos into clarity, and silence into your sharpest weapon. They believed letting you go would cost them nothing, that you'd fade away quietly, tend to your wounds in the shadows, and come running the moment they crooked a finger. But here's the truth they never saw coming. Your silence can become the sharpest punishment they'll ever face. Most people assume disappearing as a sign of weakness, a surrender. But through the lens of Stoicism, silence is not a retreat, it's a blade. Silence, when done with purpose, is not about hiding, it's about evolving. It forces those who cast you aside to confront the fragility of their own control. And when that silence is rooted in clarity and calm, it becomes the loudest, most unshakable consequence of all. Those who threw you away without hesitation will often be the ones who unravel quietly when they realize you are no longer emotionally available. If you've grown tired of being the one who waits, explains, or pleads for understanding, then you're exactly where you need to be. Because here's the hard truth. Painful endings rarely come with an explanation. Sometimes there's no argument, no emotional storm, just a cold, wordless vanishing. They slip out of your life without looking back, and the cruelest part is that you're left behind, trying to make sense of it all, while they live as if you never existed. And then comes the most overused piece of advice. Go no contact. Cut them off, block, disappear, stay silent. Maybe, just maybe, they'll feel your absence. Maybe your silence will scream loud enough. But time passes, and nothing happens. That's when a new kind of pain sets in. You disappeared hoping they'd miss you, but they don't. Your silence becomes a hollow echo inside you, a void that offers no answers and heals nothing. You step away, and they keep going, unfazed, as if nothing has shifted. The truth is, disappearing doesn't strike like it used to. We live in a world full of people who vanish, block, ghost, and then come back. It's no longer a shock, it's a pattern. And what's predictable doesn't hurt, doesn't shake, doesn't hold meaning. If silence was once a weapon, it's lost its edge, especially with those who discarded you. They've seen the act before, and they're ready for it. They're emotionally prepared. They no longer feel your absence because they expected it all along. That's why disappearing alone is no longer enough. Strategic detachment has to go beyond cutting contact. It's not about vanishing from someone's life, it's about vanishing from their emotional narrative. It's about becoming unreachable, not physically, but emotionally. Think of when you still follow someone online, but you notice their energy has shifted. No warmth in their captions, no eagerness in their tone. They're still there, but they're no longer accessible. That's what stings. That's what cracks the ego of the one who let you go. Because you didn't disappear. You stayed differently. You didn't block. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You simply became still, neutral, unreachable. And that silence hits harder because you still exist. But none of your energy points in their direction anymore. You're no longer a reflection. They can engage with you, become a mirror. They can't control. When you vanish, people can make up stories. They're just hurt. They'll be back. But when you remain calm, quiet, and emotionally out of reach, there's nothing for them to grab onto. You haven't left, but you're already gone. This isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself. It's about no longer offering explanations or reactions. It's about moving forward in peace. If you thought silence alone was enough, you may have fallen for the myth of surface-level detachment. The real transformation happens inside. It's not about leaving, it's about becoming untouchable. Even when they still have access to you. This kind of detachment doesn't leave visible wounds. It breaks illusions, because nothing is more unsettling than someone who's physically present, yet entirely absent in spirit. Eventually, you realize your silence no longer frightens them, because they've learned to live without it. It's no longer shocking, no longer disorienting. It's part of the pattern they've rehearsed in their mind. Disappearing used to echo. Now it's just background noise. They've adapted. And when that happens, the rules have to change, because silence alone won't win the game anymore. They've studied you. They've memorized your rhythm. They know the silence will come eventually, so they prepare for it. They've built emotional walls so solid that when you stop speaking, it doesn't shake them. They even anticipate it. They'll go quiet soon. They always do. Then they'll come back once things cool down. That mindset is what makes your disappearance harmless, predictable, easy to ignore. You've been rehearsed in their mind so many times that there's no shock left. When someone has played out your absence in their head again and again, they don't fear losing you. They don't fear anything. Deep down, they never believed your silence meant something permanent. They've learned how to sit through your storms without even getting wet. That's the power of emotional preparation. They've stripped your silence of its power before it even arrived. So, when you pull away expecting to cause an emotional earthquake, all you get is stillness. Cold, quiet stillness. Not because they've stopped caring entirely, but because they're no longer surprised. You've become part of their script, the dramatic pause they know will be followed by your reappearance. And that's when it hits you. Silence doesn't work the way it used to. It's no longer a statement, it's background noise, expected, managed, filed away under temporary absence. Your withdrawal has lost its sting, and the more you repeat it, the safer they feel. What once made them tremble now barely makes them blink, not because they've grown stronger, but because you become emotionally predictable. You gave them the blueprint, and they learned how to navigate it without losing balance. This is your turning point, because silence alone isn't enough. Withdrawal without transformation becomes invisible. You stop being a mystery. You stop being missed, not because you've lost value, but because you're doing the same dance over and over. When you disappear hoping to be noticed, they can feel it. When you go quiet, but secretly wish to be chased, they sense it, and they don't move. Because as long as you're waiting for them to notice, you're still emotionally present, still attached, still feeding them power. But everything shifts when you stop running away and start walking forward. When silence is no longer a tactic, but a reflection of your growth. When you don't hide, you move. When you don't punish, you evolve. That's when it stings. They expect your silence to whisper, "Please notice me." They never expect it to declare, "I no longer care." It's in that shift, from waiting to walking, that your absence finally becomes real, not noisy, not angry, just solid, quiet, unreachable. They were ready for your tears. They were ready for your confusion. They were ready for the vanishing act followed by your soft return, but they were never ready for your calm. They were never ready for your peace, for the version of you that walks without looking back, the one who doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, doesn't seek attention. That version of you, it shatters the illusion they built. It flips the script entirely, because now they're the ones left watching in silence, unsure how to bring you back. Ironically, it's not the volume of your silence that breaks them, it's the clarity of your presence in your own life. It's the way you fill your days without needing their validation. It's the fact that your energy no longer chases, no longer retreats, it simply stands firm. That energy, that stillness, that peace is a language they can't speak, and it terrifies them, not because you left, but because this time you didn't leave with the door open. You didn't scatter crumbs for them to follow back. You simply turned and walked in a different direction. No more waiting, no more checking who's watching your stories, no more holding your breath for closure that will never come. You've stopped playing hide and seek. Now you're building something real, and that's the part they can no longer control. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't to disappear, it's to stay. Stay silent. Stay steady. Stay without offering access. You don't leave. You don't block. You don't run. But you also don't respond, don't explain, and don't invite emotional interaction. That, precisely, is what disarms them. People who thrive on emotional games rely on your reactions. They feed off your patterns, the replies, the explanations, the justifications. When you vanish, they wait. When you return, they continue. But when you stay without playing, that's when everything starts to collapse. Imagine someone trying to play chess against you, but you simply stop moving your pieces. You're still there, still at the table, but unmoved. No reaction, no counterplay, no drama, just presence. That kind of silence terrifies people who rely on control, because when you remain emotionally calm, when you neither chase nor provoke, the control they once had begins to slip, and they have no idea how to handle that. Your stillness becomes the loudest message you'll ever send. I see you, but I am no longer yours to move. That shift is subtle, but lethal. You're still, visible, still in their world, but unreachable. You haven't vanished. You've simply stopped bleeding energy in their direction, and that quiet withdrawal begins to choke their illusion of dominance. They expect emotional withdrawal to be dramatic blocked calls, angry messages, long monologues, but they never expect serenity. They never expect you to remain present and untouched. That's the part they can't decode. It's unbearable for them, because now their old tactics no longer work. Their words don't sink in. Their gestures don't pull you back. They toss out bait, and you simply don't bite. It's like throwing stones into a calm lake, expecting ripples, and watching the surface remain perfectly still. That calm, that refusal to be disturbed, is a language they can't speak, and it begins to unravel their sense of power. They start asking themselves questions they never expected to. Why aren't they reacting? Why didn't they answer? Why do they look fine? These thoughts eat away at them because they're not seeing pain. They're not seeing effort. They're seeing peace, and they can't touch it. What breaks them isn't your absence, it's your neutrality. It's the fact that you didn't vanish, you simply detached. And in doing so, you turned the entire game board upside down. You're still there, but unavailable. Present, but out of reach. It's like you changed the lock without telling them. They still have the key, but it opens nothing now. That realization sparks panic, because suddenly they see that access to you was never a right, it was a privilege, and they lost it quietly. Without fanfare. They test the waters, a casual message, a harmless comment, a question disguised as small talk. But you don't take the bait. You don't lash out. You don't even punish. You simply exist without leaning in. And that restraint, that silent power, is what finally breaks their grip. You've stopped feeding the cycle. You've stepped out of the arena without a fight. Now they're shouting into a void, trying to provoke life from something that no longer beats for their attention. You've walked away emotionally, without leaving physically, and that's the difference. Absence is easy to process. Presence, without access, that's harder. They see you breathing, thriving, moving forward, but not for them. That reality burns. While they're spinning in circles, trying to decode your silence, you've already stepped into a new phase one where you don't need validation. Your calm now speaks louder than any reaction ever could. At first, they watch from a distance, confident your silence is temporary, a passing storm. But time passes, and you don't return. Your energy doesn't shift back. That's when their confidence turns into something else. Quiet panic. They start checking your posts, your stories, scanning for hidden messages. A song lyric, a vague quote, a photo with a double meaning. Something, anything to confirm you still feel something. But there's nothing. No cryptic captions, no bitter memes, no emotional breadcrumbs for them to feed on. Just freedom. A peace they didn't expect and weren't prepared for. Your digital silence isn't meant to provoke. It's meant to protect. You're not performing pain, you're simply living on your own terms. And that shakes them more than any argument ever could, because they can no longer track your emotions. There are no clues, no codes, no half-hidden messages to dissect. And the more they search, the more they realize they haven't just lost access to you, they've lost access to your inner world. See, people don't panic when you're angry. They panic when they can't read you anymore, when your steps stop following a pattern, when your energy feels unreachable. Emotional manipulators survive on knowing your next move. But now you're off the radar. They scroll and scroll, searching for signs that your silence is still about them. But nothing connects. Your life no longer revolves around their absence. Your peace doesn't include their presence. That disconnect begins as a small thought. Maybe they're just hiding it well, but days pass. No signs, no slips, no passive-aggressive posts. No reactive replies. That thought becomes a whisper. What if they've really moved on? The whisper grows louder, slipping into their ego. What if I don't matter anymore? Once that question takes root, it spreads like wildfire, because until now, they've always assumed your silence was emotional, a cry for attention. Not indifference. Now, they're not so sure. And it's not just what you're not saying, it's what you're doing. Instead, you're living, posting with lightness, laughing in photos, sharing beauty without a trace of sadness. You don't look like someone trying to be okay. You look like someone who already is. That contrast stings. They expected struggle. They expected an obvious void. Instead, you're not limping, you're flying. And it's not an act. It's not a strategy. It's simply what happens when peace finally replaces longing. The silence they once mistook for weakness now feels like an unbridgeable distance. Not the kind that waits to be closed, the kind that can't be crossed. And that's the kind of distance that shatters the illusion of their importance, slowly, quietly, completely. Now they begin to wonder, was their power over you ever real? Was their control just something they imagined? Maybe, just maybe, they weren't the reason behind your silence at all. Maybe they were the reason behind your healing. And that thought cuts deeper than any fight, because it doesn't just say you're gone. It says you've outgrown them. It whispers that their chapter in your story didn't end with a slam, it ended with a step forward. And when someone who once felt central to your world realizes they're not even a footnote anymore, it bruises the part of them they keep hidden, their ego, their identity, their belief in their own irreplaceability. Why? They thought your silence was about pain. Now they're starting to see it was always about release. And that revelation? It breaks something inside them. They're not just witnessing your absence anymore. They're witnessing your freedom. Once, pain lived inside you like an unwelcome guest. It stayed up with you through sleepless nights, shadowed you when you reread old messages, and whispered in your ear every time silence crushed your hope. But now, that pain has quietly moved out, and in its place, they're the ones pacing it. Night scanning your digital footprints, looking for signs of weakness, signs of attachment, proof of unfinished wounds. What they see instead is emptiness, not within you, but in the space they used to occupy. You didn't explode. You didn't beg. You didn't block them, scream, or send one last desperate monologue. You didn't try to prove your worth one final time. You simply stopped explaining, stopped reaching, stopped giving access to someone who didn't know how to value it. That kind of silence, clean, calm, and utterly unbothered echoes inside them. At first, they misread it as another one of your moods, a temporary break, a silent protest. But time kept ticking, and your silence didn't fade. It didn't thaw, it stayed. That's when they realized this wasn't a phase. This was a turning point, a shift they never saw coming. For the first time, your silence didn't carry hope. It carried finality. And nothing is more terrifying to someone used to being forgiven. The roles have reversed. You're no longer the one waiting for closure they are. You're no longer the one clinging they are. You're no longer the one trapped in confusion they are. The same silence they once used as a weapon against you is now pressing in on them. Because silence full of emotion is easy to ignore, it eventually breaks. But silence that is neutral, peaceful, almost cold, that's unbearable. They can't scream at it. They can't argue with it. They can't fix it. So they're left sitting in the echo of their own actions. Now they remember the moments they brushed you off, the careless words, the times you reached out and they pulled away. Those memories, once meaningless, now come back with weight, because they understand that was the last time you tried. They're not haunted by what you said. They're haunted by everything you didn't. the conversations you stopped initiating, the effort you stopped making, the doors you closed without slamming, the calm that replaced your chaos. And while they sit in silence hoping you'll break it, deep down they know this is different. You're not punishing them, you've simply disconnected. The panic arrives quietly, not in loud, dramatic waves, but in subtle moments, when they check your profile and see nothing aimed at them, when their messages sit unread, when your name disappears from their notifications and never returns. They start to panic not because you left, but because you didn't try to come back. You didn't ask to be understood. You didn't plead for one last conversation. And that absence of noise, that's what cuts the deepest dot. They reach out, maybe not directly, maybe through subtle moves, a shared post, a random message after weeks. But your responses are no longer automatic. Your silence now has boundaries. Your peace is untouchable. Now they're finally feeling the weight you carried. Not because you sought revenge, but because healing has side effects. And one of them is clarity. Clarity creates space. And that's a space they no longer know how to fill. This is where the real pain begins. The most devastating part? It's not the silence itself, it's the realization that this time you're not watching your phone. You're not checking to see if they care. You're not counting the hours since the last message. You've stopped waiting altogether. That's what breaks them. Not your absence, your indifference. Not your distance, your peace, because now the pain lives with them. Quiet, heavy, permanent, and nothing they do seems to bring you back, At some point, your silence stops being just a distance. It becomes a mirror, a reflection that forces them to see what they've done, not through confrontation, not through words, but through who you've become. They no longer control you. You no longer beg. You no longer explain. You no longer show any sign of emotional life that revolves around them. Every move they try now falls flat. The buttons they used to press don't work anymore. The game ended, but no one told them. They send a message hoping for tension. They post something to spark jealousy. They try to stage situations that once pulled you back in, but all they find is silence, stillness, indifference, not forced, not performed. Real, and that emptiness in the place where your reactions used to live drives them insane. Because what they see isn't anger, it's absence. Not absence of presence, but absence of participation. You're not punishing them. You've simply stepped out of the arena. You're no longer playing the role they wrote for you. You used to overthink every detail, watch every signal, read between every line. Now the only thing you're watching is your own peace. You're not ignoring them to provoke a reaction. You've simply stopped looking in their direction. And that's what disorients them. Because they thought they had time. They thought you'd always be emotionally available. They thought they could leave the door open and you'd keep standing in the hallway. But now the hallway is empty, and the door leads to no one. They see this new version of you, and it unsettles them. Not because you're angry, but because you're clear. You become a living reflection of everything they lost. And facing that forces them to see the part they played in your transformation. You carry no bitterness and throw no blame. Yet your silence speaks volumes, saying everything they never wanted to hear. I'm not who I was, and I'm never going back to that version of me. For someone who once thrived on being the center of your world, that truth is unbearable. When they try to step back into your life now, nothing feels familiar. The doors don't open the way they used to. The warmth is gone, not cold, just no longer available. The version of you they once knew no longer exists, and the version that remains will not bend. They try to play the old game, subtle messages, guilt trips, dangling shared memories like bait. But the rules have changed, and more importantly, the player has left. There's no audience, no applause, no performance, just silence. And that's what they can't handle, because they used to own the stage. They set the tempo, they directed the play. Now the stage is empty. The lights are off. You're not in the front row anymore, waiting for their next move. You've left the theater entirely. And with that, you've reclaimed your story. It's a strange kind of pain, the one that doesn't come from being left, but from realizing you're no longer needed. That's what they feel now. The quiet collapse of a power dynamic they didn't even realize they were depending on. The most piercing part? It's not what you've said, it's what you haven't. There's no dramatic closure, no explosive ending, just the gentle finality of a chapter that closed itself, without permission, without performance, without seeking validation. You don't come back to prove a point. You don't return to show them what they've lost, because real growth doesn't perform, it simply moves on. When they look at you now, they don't see someone trying to win. They see someone who is already won by no longer needing to play. Every attempt to pull you back now is like punching air. The reactions they once expected with confidence now meet nothing but stillness. That's what breaks them now. You've become calm but not passive, present but not available. Your stillness is no longer a waiting room, it's a boundary. Your silence no longer screams for attention, it radiates peace. And for someone addicted to chaos, peace is terrifying. So they send a message, even if it's just a single emoji. They like an old photo, hoping it triggers something. They try to provoke you with half-meant words or nostalgia games, but nothing lands because the version of you that once chased no longer exists. Your energy is now a closed gate they can still see, but they can't walk through. That hurts in ways they'll never admit, because they know with each unanswered attempt that they've lost the best part of you. Not your presence, but your openness. You didn't become cold, you became precise. And with that precision came power. The power to observe without reacting, to exist without seeking, to stay without clinging. That level of presence is the sentence they never saw coming. Now they move through the same spaces where your attention once poured over them, and they find nothing but silence. Not because you disappeared, but because you detached. You're there, but not for them. And that is a deeper rejection than words could ever deliver. They used to know exactly how to reach you, what to say, when to say it. Now, every attempt is a swing in the dark. Every move is met with your stillness. You've become the living consequence of every moment they thought you'd never walk away. And it wasn't rage that made you leave. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that needs no explanations, no revenge. Just distance, just silence, just a life where they're no longer at the center. Now they sit in front of your calm like someone locked outside a door they thought could never close. A door that once opened at the slightest knock. But this time the handle doesn't turn. The welcome mat is gone. And so are you, not in body, but in willingness. You're no longer hiding, you're shining. But your light no longer warms them. It simply exists without invitation, without explanation, and that untouchable presence is the wound they now carry. Because nothing destroys a person's ego like realizing they no longer know how to get your attention. Nothing confuses them more than seeing you at peace without needing anything from them, not even closure. They used to feel like the center of your gravity, but now your orbit has shifted. Your focus has expanded. Your silence is no longer a strategy, it's a state. One they can't break, can't reach, can't touch. And in that untouchable silence, they finally feel what they once ignored in you. Because the truth is brutal. Those who didn't know how to protect you now don't even know how to approach you. So now, the question isn't whether they'll come back, it's whether you'll still be there if they do. And if they are met with your presence, will they even recognize who you've become? The silence they once dismissed has transformed you. You no longer explain. You no longer perform. And you sure as hell don't chase anyone who couldn't see your worth the first time. But here's the part that matters most. Will you keep growing? Or will you let their return drag you back into the same cycle? Because they will return. Maybe. Not with words. Maybe just with a like, a glance, or a casual, "Hey, how are you?" But it's not about what they do, it's about what you do next. Are you strong enough now to stay calm and stay gone? If you felt that shift inside you, if these words lit something in your chest, don't let it fade. Make it your turning point. Use this silence not to wait, but to rebuild. And before you go, remember there's a place you can return. To every week for powerful strategies to turn heartbreak into emotional strength and silence into your greatest weapon. Subscribe and stay with us. Your peace is just getting started. If this message sparked something in you, drop a comment below. My silence is my strength.